Have you ever had someone on the team who just didn't seem to fit? Maybe someone who might even been a little bit toxic as well. The ability to work effectively with others, to add value within the dynamics of a group endeavor, is more critical in today's fluid world than it has ever been. Few people succeed at work, in the family, or in any social context without it. Today we're going to be talking about a book called The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. We're going to give it a book review. In his book, he talks about how to develop or how to identify people who would be ideal team players. And he calls out, and we'll tell you up front quickly here, that an ideal team player needs to have three attributes.
Characteristics.
Yeah. And they are humble, hungry, and smart. And we're going to define those for you here in a moment. But the secret of success to the book is not any one of those attributes by themselves, but how they magically work together in identifying and showing someone who's a team player or not, or developing someone into being a team player. So Patrick says, what makes this model so powerful and unique is the required combination of all three attributes together. Even if one attribute is missing in a team member, teamwork becomes significantly more difficult and sometimes even impossible. So Jared, give us some definitions for each of these humble, hungry, and smart.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we're looking at Patrick Lencioni's book, The Ideal Team Player, talking about three core attributes that you want to look for in individuals when you're building a team. They are humble, hungry, and smart. I'm going to define the first one here for you. Humble, and this comes from C.S. Lewis, because if you've been following us for any length of time here, you'll know that that's one of our favorite definitions of humility. And it's just simple. Humility isn't thinking less of yourself. That would be a bad idea, right? We're trying to add value to people. So obviously humility isn't thinking less of yourself, but it is thinking of yourself less, as in a little less often or a little less frequent.
Yeah.
It's thinking of others, really, and putting their needs often before your own. So humility isn't thinking less of yourself per se, but it's thinking of yourself less.
I'm lousy, I'm good for nothing.
Yeah,
that's thinking less of yourself. That's not
Right.
what we're talking about at all. It's about the frequency of where your thoughts lie. Are your thoughts more about you, or are your thoughts more about others and adding value to others?
Exactly. And the next attribute that Patrick identifies is hungry. Okay, and hungry, he says in his book here, hungry people are always looking for more, right? More things to do, more to learn. In other words, they're trying to grow, right? More responsibility to take on. Hungry people almost never have to be pushed by a manager, right? Because they're self-motivated, right? They're diligent. And they're constantly thinking about the next step and the next opportunity. So that's what Patrick means by hungry. They're kind of self-motivated, always looking for more. They want to help grow themselves and or the organization. And then smart. This may not be quite what you thought it meant when we first said humble, hungry, and smart. Some might refer to this as an emotional intelligence, which wouldn't be a bad comparison. But Patrick says smart is probably a little simpler than that. Smart people just have good judgment and intuition around the subtleties of group dynamics and the impact of their words and their actions. And so obviously this definition of smart is more related to people skills.
Yeah, emotional intelligence is the buzzword for the corporate world. People skills, if you're in a customer-facing role, that's a key phrase, but people skills is often defined as soft skills, not hard skills like developing or creating a product or marketing the product and getting the product out there. The soft skills are those relational, and I hate the term soft skills because it's not soft. It's not easy. It's actually really hard to develop and grow those people skills you need to communicate well with others. So
we're gonna dive in. Bill's gonna give us examples of players with one or more, but not all three, and hopefully this will lead you, as it did Bill and I, to kind of an aha moment of humble, hungry, and smart. That seems logical. But yes, I agree. So pay attention here. It's going to take a little bit for Bill to do this. But Bill, again, explain what's the importance of identifying and how it works together when you do find the ideal?
Yeah, so keep in mind the definitions we just gave you about humble, hungry, and smart as we go through this. So again, as Patrick says, even if you're missing one, it's going to be a huge challenge to have that ideal team or ideal team player. So for those who only have one attribute, someone who's just humble, Patrick describes them as the pawn. You know, they're really people pleasers. They can be moved around. They're always thinking
Forever asking for help because, they just need the
or
help.
they're always concerned about what everybody else thinks of them,
Yep.
right? Because that's where their thoughts lie. So that person's called the pawn. Someone who's just hungry, he calls the bulldozer. They don't have those people skills, right? They're not very humble about it. They're just bulldozing, pushing their way through to get things done. They're just hungry and nothing else. And of course, smart is the one with people skills, but they're not humble about it, nor are they very hungry. And Patrick calls those the charmer. So those are examples of those who have just one of the attributes. Now let's go into maybe those who have two of the three attributes and what are they referred to and what do they look like. So if someone has humble hungry, then they're an accidental mess maker. So they're hungry, they're trying to do more, and they're humble about it, but they don't have those people skills. Maybe they are stepping on toes and pushing people over and to get things done.
Irritating their coworkers.
Yeah, and some of them just don't realize it. Some of them are actually unaware of the effects that they are having on those around them, and others do, but irregardless, they're both accidental mess makers. Right? So someone who has humble hungry, accidental mess maker, someone who is hungry smart, skillful politician, right? They're hungry, they're going, they have the people skills, they're just not very humble about it. It's all about me, what can I do for me, what can I get out of this as they go forward. So they are the skillful politician. And I'm sure we could think of a number of public figures that we could throw into all these categories. We don't want to go there. That's not the purpose of this. But I'm sure some of you have your minds drifting to one person or another that might fall into these categories. But lastly, we have humble hungry was the accidental mess maker. We have hungry smart, the skillful politician. And now we have smart humble, the lovable slacker. They're missing the hungry. Right? They're not really got the drive to do more, to do extra, to find solutions on their own, to offer resolutions of themselves on their own.
Doing just enough to get by.
Just enough. They park the car in backwards. As soon as the day's over, they're gone. They're just doing enough to get the paycheck and a little more.
So, Bill, what then makes the ideal? What does Patrick tell us in his book makes us the ideal?
Having all three of these, humble, hungry, and smart, is what Patrick calls the ideal team player. Now, this came about, and Patrick mentions this in the book, that Patrick runs a group called the Table Group. They go in and they counsel and advise and coach executive leaders. And they would talk on values, and everyone kept asking, well, what are your values? What are your values? And he was hesitant to share because he didn't want them just ticking over their values. They want each organization to come up with their own values. But he eventually succumbed and started telling people about these values. And just kind of the epiphany of how powerful they were came across, and here we are with the book, The Ideal Team Player. So humble, hungry, smart, it's all about these three together. Not perfectly, not that you have 100% of all three attributes, right? But that you have a healthy amount of each attribute that's effective, that it's being demonstrated, that you're interacting with others with all three. That makes people an ideal team player.
And I think too, what we had talked about before, Bill, when we were doing this content is, we had that aha moment that we're hoping you'll have. And for me, it was just thinking logically about these three terms themselves. Yeah. Like, think about a person who's pretty humble, right? They're a humble person. There's not a lot of pride, but yet they have really good people skills, and they're just good with people. They can read people, they can understand people, and then you add to that they're hungry. like they're self-motivated, they're driven. And when you put those three together in a healthy amount, it's like, yes, I would add that person to my team like now. If
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so for me, it was let's just think about the three terms logically. And that was my kind of an aha moment. But we do want to give you a disclosure, and I'm going to read you a quote from the book. But I'm super grateful for Patrick that he put this in there, because you may be coming at this and be like, whoa, wait a minute, I inherited this dysfunctional team. Or you may say, hey, wait a minute, I actually luckily inherited a great team. But so whether you're building a team from scratch, which isn't normally the case, or you're inheriting a team, just hear Patrick's disclosure so you don't go off the rails too quickly like I was tempted to do before I got to the disclosure. So he said the most reliable way to ensure that teamwork takes hold in an organization would be to hire only ideal team players. Of course, that is neither possible nor practical, especially considering that most leaders don't have the luxury of creating their teams from scratch. But all leaders can certainly do their best to try to recruit, select, and hire people who are humble, hungry, and smart when the opportunity arises to bring someone in that's new. So just a great, I think, disclosure from Patrick to say, hey, I know that this isn't going to be the case for everyone, but we can start small if we need to. Yeah. So again, humble, hungry, smart, those are the attributes Patrick says we should be looking for when we're putting a team together. But let's move into some of what we would call the strengths of the book as a whole.
Yeah, this is a book review after all.
It is a book review. So that's kind of the synopsis of the book, couple of disclosures. For me, I came away from this book thinking, thank the Lord, it's so simple and it's so clear. And that was a big win for me for a strength of the book. Big win. Yeah. Second one for me, I think Bill mentioned this being one of his as well. The book is actually in two parts. It starts with a fable. It starts with a story. So it actually starts as a fiction.
Novel-like.
Yeah, like a novel.
Yeah.
And
sure.
Again, you'll understand when you read the book, but it's about individuals who then you can go back and identify, humble, hungry, or didn't have the smarts, however you want to look at it. And he fleshes them out as characters when he gets to the actual content of where this model came from, as Bill kind of talked about the table group, and then how to implement it, the application part of the book. And so it's just really cool how it's written in two. And if you're a person who's like, I don't have a lot of time to read it all, even though this book is short and small and I don't have time to read it, you could actually pick it up and start reading from the model, forget the fable story, and you're still going to understand, you're still going to get it.
You're going to get everything.
But the fable does kind of help. And it is refreshing, especially if you're reading a lot of leadership books.
It brings context.
Right,
it
brings
does
context.
to the meat of the book. Yeah. And just to echo about what Jared was saying about being simple, the simplicity and clarity of the book, one of the key attributes for me, for someone who's a communicator, or those who communicate, they can put the cookies on the bottom shelf.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So you have people in the audience of different walks of life, different age groups, different backgrounds, but they all can walk away with a clear understanding of the material being communicated.
Right.
And Patrick just gets a home run here.
Oh, he nails it, yeah.
With this. That is just so simple. The cookies are on the bottom shelf. You will have walked away with a clear understanding of what he's trying to get across in the book. And it is powerful stuff.
Yeah. Another strength that we identified was when he gets to the application part, he walks you through kind of how to interview and how to do it well. He gives you tips on what to look for, questions to ask, how to collaborate with other team leads and managers within your organization if you need to make sure you're all kind of collaborating about people coming onto the team. It shouldn't be just one person. Say, hey, I hired you someone new. Good luck with this person. No, that person should have a right to sit in, and so those kinds of things. And that was super helpful. I think hey, this is interview 101, but yet coupled with this idea of humble, hungry, smart, he walked us through it pretty well.
Yeah, interviewing's not a solo sport.
No, should never be.
It is, no, yeah. So.
I mean, unless you're a sole owner of a company, but
Well,
I would still put together some people you love and trust to help you with that.
Wise counsel.
Wise counsel.
Yeah.
And then the last one I think is accountability, but I'm going to save that one because we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
There's some self-reflection that we found the book led us to that was super, super helpful. And then Bill, walk us through one or two of the book's weaknesses, because again, Patrick's not paying us to do this interview, so we're not biased by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, we're not getting paid. It's not a promotion. We just found value in the book and we wanted to share it with you.
Absolutely.
But for one weakness for me it was just too short. It was clear. It was concise. I walked away going, I wanted more. But then I walked away thinking even more about it, that, hey, everything I needed to know was in there.
Yeah.
But it was just such a good read. I just wish there was more of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And for me, we joked, we got a laugh out of this because for me, that was one of my strengths that I was going to put in there was, hey, this book was easy to digest and it was quick. Didn't take up too much of my time.
yeah.
But neither here nor there. It's both good. So, Bill, we got some memorable moments for the for the listeners. So, walk us through just a couple of the really good memorable moments that you had, and then I'll take a turn.
Yeah, for me, I think this was so powerful, and it was such an aha moment of how, I thought about these attributes separately, but I never put them all together, right? And that was a big ha-ha moment. And for me, in my role at work, I'm always looking for potential leaders, for people to be equipped, to train, to rise up. And we have a leadership program, development training program at work. And I'm always looking for candidates to enter into that program. Using this as a foundation of this is where I'm starting to help identify potential leaders was a huge aha moment. It really helped put a safety net in place that I didn't have previously going, that could be a good leader, and they get in there and like, ooh, they were not a good leader. But using this as a foundation of identifying potential leaders,
Yep.
if they're humble, if they're hungry, if they're smart, they're going to be an ideal team player, and you want your leaders to be ideal team players. You want them to exemplify the type of teams they're going to be leading, or you want them to lead down the road. So great way to help identify potential leaders as a start. There's more to it, and we'll talk about that maybe in another episode of how to identify leaders, and we'll get there. But that's the start of it for me. And it's just, a good foundation for team building. And just how simple all three attributes. It's just one by themselves, not a big deal, but the magic really comes to light. The magic happens when you put all three together. So those are my memorable moments. What about you, Jared?
Yeah, for me, one of the biggest things for me coming away from the book, that I'm gonna take with me as a memorable moment for sure, is the call out that humility is an essential for good leadership. I mean, we talked about this before in a previous episode or two or three. Humility is a necessity. Like to lead other people, you need to have a healthy dose of humility, and that's. I mean, I just started coaching my daughter's middle school softball team, and although I've worked a lot with students and a lot with kids, been doing so since I was a kid. I got so much experience doing this. Coaching, sport, I'm noticing is going to be a little bit different, right? And so I walked in there and I'm like, I've got so much to do with these girls. I'm going to show them this. I'm going to show them that. And watching my friend Brian, who asked me to help him coach, he's just going to be amazing. Yeah. Him and his wife, and I'm going to learn so much. But I had to remind myself, okay, I got to be humble here. Even though I played high school ball and I had my heyday, you know how it is. I have to come into it humble to learn. So, but Patrick says this in the book. I wanted to give you this quote. He says, great team players lack excessive ego or concerns about status. We talked about that. Like leadership starts before you have a title, right?
Yeah.
They're quick to point out the contributions of others. They're slow to seek their own attention. So it's like, Bill, you did such a great job. That's wonderful. Good for you. Actually, thinking about it, I had a chance to do exactly this. I helped a dear friend of mine with a retreat that she was a big part of hosting. And for part of that role, I was on the stage. I was helping do some things. And I made sure to kind of slip out the green room door and out the back before people could come in and either do their complimenting or whatever, because I wanted her to have her moments. I wanted Rachel to have her moment of this is her moment, right? This is a big deal for her to run this. So I didn't want to steal any of the limelight. So that, after, that had just happened, right? And then I'm reminded about, and then we're reading this book and I'm like, that's exactly right. I had an opportunity. I'm so glad I took it. Because it is, I was tempted to stick around. There's some people I knew in the building. I wanted to go say hi, but I'm like, I need to take this opportunity to let somebody else
Make space for
right
someone
make
else.
space, right? So
Yeah.
and I'm so glad I did, because again, then the next week we were reading this book. So again, they're quick to point out the contributions of others, give them that platform, right?
Yeah.
Slow to seek attention for themselves. They share the credit, right? They emphasize team over self. It's kind of saying the same thing over and over again, right? They define success collectively, again, like a good coach would, right? You see those press conferences at the end of the
Right.
game. It's the coach that's like, hey, we need to do this a little bit better, or we did this great today. He's not speaking in singular terms or blaming the team, like, well, they didn't do this right today and they kind of sucked at this. Like, that's the difference that Patrick, I think, is talking about. There's inclusivity in the language of we, right? Give people their platform, give people their credit. He goes on to say, it's no great surprise then that humility is the single greatest and most indispensable attribute of being a team player. So for me, I would phrase this a lot quicker. I would say humility is the lifeblood of leadership. And just leave it
So
there,
true.
because that was for me one of the biggest takeaways of this book, is just the fact that in the three attributes that Patrick kind of found, and they kind of coined into this term and into this way of looking for leaders and what to look for. I'm so glad humility was the first one.
And I would just add on that a little bit by saying I think strength of character is at the heart of leadership, and at
sure.
the heart of a strong character is humility. It is
Yeah.
the most important. Absolutely.
You could interchange humility with character if you wanted to, but
yeah,
it goes hand in hand, I think.
Yeah.
So, and then personal connections. I'll put it to you this way: coming away from the book, kind of trying to find some personal connections with it. For me, started with the humility, obviously, but personally, you may have heard this said before, I think in one of our other episodes, but we should always be the first pupil of our study.
Yeah.
So when reading this book, and when reading any book on leadership for that matter, or any book on self-growth, really we should be looking at the man in the mirror first. And so that for me,
person.
person in the mirror is me. That from this book then begs the question, is Jared the ideal team player? So are there areas of humble, hungry, smart that I need to grow in? Because if we're honest, each and every one of us, although we may have a good, healthy dose of these, I hope. If you don't, you know where to work. But even if we do, there's still room for growth. There's still room for growth.
Yeah. And none of us are perfect. So, yeah, always that opportunity and room to do better and be better.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And there's some lessons. Bill is going to walk us through, I guess, a couple of different lessons that you pulled from here for yourself.
Yeah. The first time I've read this book a couple times now. It's worth reading more than once.
Probably listened to it too, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I have the audiobook on my Kindle, and I think I have the hard copy around somewhere. It's just, I'm going to reiterate what I've said already. It was just such an aha moment that this is a foundational step to identifying potential future leaders. You don't want a leader who's not humble. You don't want a leader who's not smart, and you don't want a leader who is not hungry. Right. So to have someone who is humble, hungry, and smart, that's just number one. First thing I go and look at is this book when I'm identifying someone who I may want to develop or grow or recommend to be involved in some sort of official training as a leader.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
And second, of course, as if you're like me, as you read a book, you're placing yourself in the book and you're kind of self-evaluating. And it's one great thing about the art of storytelling, specifically in this context, being such of a novel, and I mean novel, like a book novel, in how he told this at first, the novel in the first half and the meat in the second half of the book. You put yourself in the story of that novel, and
Which
you're like,
character,
which character am I, and where do
yeah.
I fit? And it made me really have that aha moment of, well, snap, where am I falling short and why? And full transparency, none of us have all three equal. We all have one that may be a little less stronger than the other two. And for me, that was hungry. And reading this book made me realize how much more intentional I have to be about being hungry. It's not, I'm just kind of relaxed. I'm a chill guy. I'm easygoing. But to really drive, I have to plan ahead and, okay, this is how I'm going to be hungry. This is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to wait for someone to come up with a problem and a plan and help them with their plan. I'm going to go, okay, where is this organization going? Where are the hurdles that's going to slow us down or prevent us from getting there? Okay, what's a solution to one of those hurdles I can bring to the table to help us move forward? So I'm actually thinking ahead now a little bit more as regards reading this book. How can I be more hungry? So that self-reflection piece was a real huge lesson for me.
Yeah, and that it's kind of a throwback again. We beat this man to death, poor John Maxwell. But he says if you cannot lead yourself, you cannot lead others. So part of Bill identifying needing a little bit more of that hunger to get out there and get some drive, right? If we're not getting, we can only lead people to where we're at.
Right.
So that's really good stuff. The other thing I just want to throw in there real quick, because I do this on the regular. Almost every episode, there's always a parenting parallel with leadership. So if you're out there and you're like, I'm a parent, I'm listening because you said you do parenting parallels, here it is. Here's your parenting parallel for you. What I noticed is the humble, hungry, smart, and being able to look for that within myself and then within my two children, my two girls and my wife, and learning how, right now I'm learning how, she's got these two real strong and she's working on this one. It allows me to have a little bit of patience and grace when I can identify humble, hungry, smart in other people and within myself. So, maybe start there. If you're like, man, I don't have the opportunity to start this right now, but you got family or siblings, or you got, kids and a wife or a husband and kids, whatever it is you're in your situation, start looking to see if you can identify humble, hungry, smart. Because it does. It leads you to be able to say, wow, I've been lacking patience with you because, I wouldn't recommend just telling them that, but, you'll know for yourself. She's not as hungry as she could be, but that's why she acts this way or he does this. And it helps you to be able to have patience and help others grow.
Yeah, and if you have a young family, what a great opportunity to start instilling these characteristics
Into your
early,
absolutely
early on to help them develop and grow further and farther than they would otherwise.
Yeah. So we could talk probably another 20, 40 minutes, but we're not going to do that. We're going to simply say 4 out of 5, 4.5 to 5 stars from us for this book, hands down, easy one for us. We loved it. And we just want to encourage you to pick up the book, The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni, and read it. We guarantee you'll get something from it.
Yeah, if someone comes to me and says, Bill, I'm a new leader, I just took over this team, what do I do? Or how do I grow as a leader? I have a short list of 5 books that are my first go-to recommendations to that individual. This one's on the list. This is really up there if you want to grow. And if you've been in leadership for a long period of time and this is new information for you, man, you're going to be better as a leader if you get the book, read it through, and digest it. So if you don't want to grow, don't buy the book.
Right.
If you don't want to grow and develop a team, then don't buy the book. But if you do want to grow and you do want to grow your team, this is the book for you. We would highly, highly recommend it. So thanks for joining us today. We appreciate you, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Take care.
See you next time.